been thinking about Castlevania Symphony of the Night lately. No particular reason. It being one of my favourite games from its time, it tends to flit in and out of my headspace now and then. Oh, I have been watching a lot of self-imposed challenge videos on YouTube lately. Mainly stuff like, can I get through Dark Souls without touching the left analog stick and with my head stuck in a butter churn? And Castlevania games crop up in those a fair bit. Can I beat Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow and all my attacks do 1 damage? I don't know, how much free time do you have? Limitless? Then yes, probably. And it was while watching Symphony of the Night being desperately milked for even more drops of engagement by some desperate zoomer or other, a thought crept into my mind. Boy, the user interface for Symphony of the Night is really bad. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. I suppose I could conceivably have used this to transition to some broader topic or moral lesson, like even the best games have their flaws and that's what gave them character, so if you change them in a remaster then you're a monster and deserve to die. But to be perfectly honest, I just wanted to spend a whole video really going into detail on just how dogshit this specific interface is. The most visible aspect is the GUI, graphical user interface, forgive my technical language dong swinging there, that appears in the top left during standard gameplay. In most games, the permanent overlay is reserved for whatever variables are most relevant to the core game mechanics. In almost all cases, that means health. There can also be stuff like ammo, magic, shield, etc., depending on the nuances at play, but even if you're going to have absolutely nothing else here, you're going to have health. So, bearing that in mind, and assuming you have a general understanding of gaming but no experience with Castlevania games, which part of this display would you assume measures the player's health? You might reasonably think it's the bar. It's an unusual colour for health. Red or green would be typical, as discussed in my language of colour video. But the bar is the most prominent feature that everything else is built around. It's also the only thing in this interface that is represented as a bar, where everything else is just a number. It's better practice in interface design to represent the most crucial numbers, such as health, in some kind of easily readable visual form, like a bar, as numbers are less immediately intuitive, especially in high-stress situations. So if you only represent one thing on your overlay as a bar, it had better be the fucking health. Indeed, if you look at the overlays of basically every later Castlevania game, such as this one from Aria of Sorrow, you'll note that the prominent topmost bar is indeed the health, decked out in a nice standard red. Don't know why it needs to have all those twiddly bits in the bottom left, nor why it appears to have a pull chain flush like an old-fashioned toilet, but the most prominent bar is health, and I can't fault that. The big bar in Symphony of the Night isn't health, it's magic. It's what Alucard uses to cast spells, and casting spells is probably the most obscure mechanic in Symphony of the Night. You need to do weird fighting game button combos to crack them off, and they're not necessary to beat the game anyway. I'm sure a lot of people got through the game never using them, or even knowing that they existed. The other thing magic is for is to dictate how long you can stay in Bat, Wolf, or Mist form, but it's quite a ways into the game before you unlock any of those. And even then, it's only while in those forms that you need to know how much magic you have left. At all other times, the bar takes up space like a fat dog on a car ride. Even worse, it pallet cycles very visibly whenever it's full, which I'd usually take as GUI shorthand for use this now, use it or lose it, big boy, which works for a cooldown superpower like Rage of the Gods in God of War, but not for something that's only used for optional spells and situational traversal forms. Moving on. If you've played a few games, but not specifically Castlevania's, you might also, equally reasonably, think that health is indicated by the number next to the red heart. Red hearts being the symbol for health in 99.9% of cases. Unfortunately, Castlevania occupies that tricky little 0.1% that remains. In fact, let's not prevaricate, it's the only thing in that 0.1%. In Castlevania, hearts represent sub-weapon energy, that is to say, ammunition. I've never understood why Castlevania got away with being so blatantly contrarian on this. Yes, at the time of the very first Castlevania game on the NES, the iconic language of games wasn't quite so standardized and there was room to experiment, but there's no excuse for stubbornly trying to keep it going in the 32-bit era. It's like going to a Spice Girls reunion concert. Incidentally, if you're wondering what your currently equipped sub-weapon is, it's over there on the far right, having no apparent visual relationship with the heart meter, but that's the least of the problems at this point. Now let's put us all out of our misery. Health is that number on the left, that a sane mind would have at least centralized in that circle, but we've established sane minds had very little to do with this. Now, I know what you're gonna say. Oh, Yahtzee, surely the letters HP are visible inside that circle, which one could reasonably infer to mean health points? Well, those tiny 3-pixel high letters, only slightly brighter than the background, they could just as easily say XP, and we could be looking looking at the experience to next level counter. Also, bear in mind that when this game first came out, everyone would have been playing it on CRT televisions, which would have smeared those 9 pixels into an unreadable mess, mistakable for a carelessly swatted fly on the screen. So we've established that the in-game overlay is a pile of giant bat pellets. Do things get any better in the pause menu, I hear you ask? Not bloody likely. Just look at the status screen. The various bits of information haven't been laid out so much as vomited across the available space. The option menu has been carelessly plopped down in the middle like a hippo into a watering hole and forced all the flamingos to scatter in every direction. Maybe it would look less like the splatter left by a drive-by shooting if there were dividing lines between all the different sections, but that wouldn't help all the information nuggets being positioned apparently at random with no consideration for how they relate to each other. Why is the level in the top right, but the XP and XP to next level is in the precise opposite corner, perched on top of gold like a little fat dragon? Why are all the stats on the left, except for attack and defense, which are on the right, identified with letters weirdly larger than all the other text? Out of curiosity, I dug up a video of the Japanese version just to see if it made any more sense there, that is to say, through the eyes of a culture that reads from right to left. But no, it's pretty much the same, except the riddle of the weirdly large attack and defense labels is now solved, as we see that they were originally in Japanese characters, for some reason. I've long since given up understanding why Japanese interfaces and song lyrics sometimes switch to English and back. Is it like when English speakers drop into French for a few words to make themselves look cultured, give their dialect a certain je ne sais quoi? Sorry, I'm veering on being racist again. I don't know why that keeps happening. Let's get back on track. Symphony of the Night's interface really is fascinatingly bad, especially considering the game is remembered as an all-time classic. Was everyone just really stupid in the late 90s? No, obviously it is a classic, at a time when basically everyone else in gaming was struggling to get their head around the new hotness of 3D graphics and producing a lot of games that looked like tobacco spit on the wall of a low-rent sailor's hostel. Symphony of the Night instead stayed in the comfortable soapy bath of 2D pixel art and proceeded to elevate it to hitherto unexplored heights, making the most out of the abundant disk space and processor power to have a game packed with beautiful environments, enemy variety, exploration, and then just when you think it's done, a whole second game tacked onto the end, equally as big as the game up to then. Now that's what I call a fucking flex. And much as you wouldn't write off the entire Last Supper just because someone wiped a single tiny bogey off on it, the game was so overwhelmingly rich and ahead of its time that we could collectively overlook a few paltry GUI design issues, and voice acting issues, and a weirdly shitty fast travel system. Oh yes, and what's with all that rigmarole you have to go through to use recovery items? You've got to equip it to one of your hands like it's a weapon, unequipping whatever weapon you usually use, then press attack to throw the food item onto the floor, then walk over it to eat it. I mean, maybe they were trying to make it more realistic. You do need a free hand to eat a sandwich, certainly more realistic than being able to pause the game and scarf down 3 curries in the course of a single frozen nanosecond, but having to walk over it to eat it? I mean, there's no concrete standard for vampire biology, but I'm pretty sure Dracula couldn't absorb nutrients through his verrucas.
Oh, this video is brought to you by Mind Cop, a new non-linear whodunit detective game where your greatest weapon is that big old beautiful brain of yours. A brutal killer is on the loose. You only have 5 days to catch them, and every action you take comes at a time cost. So think before you act and choose your moves carefully. Thankfully, you're not just some regular schmuck detective racing against the clock. You're a Mind Cop. What's a Mind Cop, you ask? Well, it's like a time cop, but instead of Jean-Claude Van Damme doing the splits, you use your Mind Cop abilities to sneak into the heads of suspects, mind surf into a psychedelic abstract dream space to solve a variety of puzzles and explore their sea of thoughts. This gets you clues and conversation topics to use in your investigation, so you're not doing the splits, you're doing the mind splits. Mind Cop is available now on PS5, Nintendo Switch, and Steam, so head on over to the link in the description and start your investigation today.